Welcome, tennis fans, and thank you for joining me today for a special, comprehensive deep dive into what will undeniably go down in the annals of sports history as one of the most tectonic shifts the tennis world has ever witnessed. We are talking about the earthquake that just rocked the pristine lawns of the All England Lawn Tennis and Croquet Club. On a sun-drenched Saturday afternoon at Wimbledon 2026, the unthinkable happened. Iga Świątek, the defending champion, the world beater, the woman who was supposed to reassert her dominance on the legendary grass of SW19, saw her title defense go up in a breathtaking cloud of smoke. And the architect of her destruction? A 21-year-old Filipino prodigy by the name of Alex Eala. In a staggering display of nerve, skill, and unyielding belief, Eala, entering the tournament as a 29th seed, pulled off an epic gladiatorial 7-6, 6-2 victory over the Polish powerhouse right in the pressure cooker center court. This was not just a tennis match. This was a cultural milestone, a changing of the guard, and a masterclass in tactical execution. With this historic upset, Eala has permanently etched her name into the history books. She became the first player from the Philippines to ever reach the second week of a Grand Slam in the Open era. She became the first Asian player in the Open era to defeat a reigning women's singles champion at Wimbledon, and in a beautiful nod to tennis history, she became the first left-handed player to take down the defending champion on these hallowed grounds since the legendary Martina Navratilova did it back in 1982. Today, we are going to dissect every single angle of this monumental upset. We will break down the tactics, the history, the overwhelming pressure, and that staggering 84-minute first set that featured an 11-9 tiebreak, a set that former British number one Greg Ruzetsky emphatically called the best set of tennis seen on center court all year. We will explore the deep emotional resonance of Eala's victory for her home country, what this devastating loss means for the future of Iga Świątek and her sudden drop in the WTA rankings, and how a young girl who used to train in ruffled socks and light-up shoes just conquered the tennis world. Grab a seat, settle in, and turn up the volume, because this is a definitive story of how Alex Eala shocked the world. To truly appreciate the magnitude of what unfolded on center court this weekend, we first have to rewind and set the stage. Context is everything in tennis, and the landscape of the 2026 WTA Tour leading up to Wimbledon has been nothing short of volatile. For Iga Świątek, the journey to London this year was laden with profound and unusual sense of urgency and, frankly, anxiety. Swiatek, a player whose name has been synonymous with absolute domination, especially on clay, had just endured a shockingly barren clay court season. For the first time in years, she arrived in London without hoisting a trophy during the European dirt swing. Whispers of a crisis of confidence had begun to circulate in the press rooms. The heavy topspin, the relentless baseline aggression, the impenetrable mental armor, cracks were starting to show. Wimbledon, therefore, was not just about defending a title for Swiatek. It was a desperate bid for redemption. It was her last, best chance to silence the doubters and salvage the first half of her 2026 campaign before the grueling North American hardcourt swing. The pressure on her shoulders was heavier than it had ever been. She needed this win not just for the trophy, but for her own psychological equilibrium. On the completely opposite end of the emotional spectrum stood Alex Eala. At just 21 years old, Eala arrived at the All England club riding a tidal wave of momentum and playing the best, most uninhibited tennis of her young life. While Swiatek was battling internal demons and external pressure, Eala was soaring. She transitioned to the grass courts this season with a revelation in her game. She reached the semifinals in Berlin, showcasing a newfound comfort on the slick surface, and then followed it up by capturing a WTA 125 title in Birmingham. She came into Wimbledon match-tough, confident, and acutely aware of her own capabilities. But beyond the recent form, there is the overarching narrative of Eala's unique burden and privilege. The Philippines, a nation of over 115 million people, is deeply passionate about sports, yet has historically been starved of global tennis icons. While heroes like boxing legend Manny Pacquiao and gymnastics phenom Carlos Yulo have flown the Philippine flag on the ultimate global stages, tennis has long waited for its champion from the archipelago. Eala carries the hopes of an entire nation every time she steps onto the court, and her fans made sure she felt it. Throughout her opening rounds, a commanding 6-1, 6-2 victory over Mexico's Renata Zarazua, and a gritty comeback win against Australia's Maya Joint. The grounds of Wimbledon were transformed. Hundreds of Filipino spectators descended upon the All-England Club, turning the traditionally polite British atmosphere into an electric, pulsating sea of support. They waved the national flag. Her team and family proudly wore T-shirts bearing the sampaguita, the national flower of the Philippines. Eala was not just playing for ranking points. She was playing for her heritage. She was playing with the strength of a nation behind her. This brings us to the matchup itself. Eala versus Swiatek is rapidly blossoming into one of the most compelling rivalries on the WTA Tour, precisely because of the fascinating clash of styles and their recent history. This was not their first rodeo. The tennis world first sat up and took notice of this matchup during the quarterfinals of the 2025 Miami Open, where Eala stunned Swiatek on hard courts, catapulting the Filipina into global stardom. Swiatek, showing the mettle of a true champion, exacted her revenge just weeks later on the clay courts of Madrid, battling back after Eala took a one-set lead. So, coming into this Wimbledon third-round clash, the head-to-head narrative was thick with tension. Swiatek knew exactly how dangerous Eala could be. Eala knew exactly what it took to beat Swiatek. It was a psychological stalemate before a single ball was struck. Tactically, grass is the great equalizer, and it specifically amplifies Eala's strengths while exposing Swiatek's historical vulnerabilities. Swiatek's game is built on extreme Western grips and heavy, looping topspin that kicks up violently on clay and hard courts, pushing opponents deep behind the baseline. But on grass, the ball doesn't bounce. It skids. It stays low. Swiatek's extreme grip requires an extra fraction of a second to get on the ball, a fraction of a second that grass simply does not forgive. Eala, on the other hand, possesses a flatter, more penetrating ball strike. As a left-hander, her natural slice serve out wide on the ad court is a lethal weapon on the slick lawns, pulling right-handed opponents entirely off the court. Eala's backhand is a laser, capable of taking the ball incredibly early on the rise, robbing Swiatek of the time she desperately needs to set up her heavy ground strokes. This tactical dynamic was the crucible in which the match would be tested. When the two players walked out onto center court, the atmosphere was thick enough to cut with a knife. The crowd, a mix of British traditionalists and fiercely passionate Filipino expats, settled in for what was highly anticipated to be a baseline war. And from the very first point, it was clear that Eala was not intimidated by the venue, the occasion, or the woman across the net. Let us dive deep into the first set, because it will be studied by tennis tacticians for years to come. It was a staggering 1 hour and 24 minutes of pure, unadulterated sporting combat. Neither player was willing to give an inch. Swiatek tried to establish her physical dominance early, pushing Eala from corner to corner, grunting with every ferocious forehand. But Eala absorbed the pace magnificently. Eala's footwork on the grass was a masterclass in lateral movement. She stayed remarkably low to the ground, allowing her to handle Swiatek's heavy balls that were skidding off the turf. The serving dynamics were fascinating. Swiatek struggled with her first serve percentage, hovering around the high 40s and low 50s in the early goings, eventually hitting 5 double faults over the course of the match. Eala capitalized on this immediately. The Filipina stepped inside the baseline on Swiatek's second serves, applying relentless pressure. But Swiatek, drawing on her championship DNA, fought off breakpoints with clutch, aggressive baseline play. As the set progressed, the tension escalated exponentially. Every game felt like a marathon. Every deuce felt like a heavyweight title round. Eventually, this titanic struggle led to the inevitable, a tiebreak. But this was no ordinary tiebreak. This was a psychological gauntlet. The score seesawed back and forth, the crowd gasping with every breathless rally. At 6-all in the tiebreak, the tension was unbearable. Swiatek, utilizing her incredible defensive skills, managed to engineer 2 set points. This is usually the moment where the defending champion breaks the spirit of a young challenger. This is the moment where experience triumphs over youth. But Alex Eala refused to read the script. Facing set point, Eala didn't play safe. She played brave. She took Swiatek's heavy returns and stepped into court, firing flat winners at kiss lines. She saved the first set point with a blistering inside-out forehand. She saved the second with a beautifully constructed serve and volley play that caught Swiatek completely off guard. The psychological toll on Swiatek was palpable. To have the set on your racket twice and have it snatched away by a fearless 21-year-old is devastating. The tiebreak pushed deep into sudden death. 9-all, 10-9 to Eala. And finally, after an agonizing, lung-busting 20-shot rally, Swiatek sent a defensive backhand sailing long. Eala took the tiebreak 11-9. The center court crowd erupted. It was a set of such high quality, such brutal intensity, that seasoned commentators were left speechless. Greg Ruzetsky, analyzing the match for BBC Radio 5 Live, was absolutely correct. It was the best set of tennis witnessed on that court all year. Winning that first set was a key that unlocked the entire match for Eala. In tennis, especially in Grand Slams, the hangover from losing a marathon 84-minute set can be terminal. And for Swiatek, the mental and physical exhaustion was immediately evident as the second set began. Eala, riding the adrenaline high of that monumental tiebreak, pounced like a predator sensing a wounded prey. Eala's tactics in the second set shifted from absorption and counterpunching to outright aggression. She recognized that Swiatek's footwork had slowed just a fraction of a second. Eala began to employ her lethal lefty forehand down the line, completely exposing Swiatek's backhand side. The Filipina raced out to a commanding 3-0 lead in the blink of an eye. She broke Swiatek's serve immediately, punishing the Pole's tentative second serves. Swiatek looked increasingly agitated, looking up at her player box, searching for answers that simply weren't there on the slick London grass. But you do not win multiple Grand Slams without having the heart of a lion, and Swiatek made one final desperate push. Trailing 3-0, the Polish star dug her heels into baseline. She started swinging freely, throwing caution to the wind because she had nothing left to lose. She managed to retrieve one of the breaks, overpowering Eala for a fleeting moment to get the set back to 3-2. The crowd leaned in, wondering if they were about to witness the patented Swiatek comeback. We have seen it 100 times before. The champion flips a switch, the challenger tightens up, and the match turns on a dime. This was the ultimate test of Alex Eala's maturation. A year ago, 2 years ago, she might have panicked. She might have let the occasion overwhelm her. But not today. Eala took a deep breath, went to her towel, and reset her mind. She staved off the late comeback attempt not by playing defensively, but by trusting the aggressive game plan that had gotten her the lead in the first place. In the very next game, Eala dialed up the pressure on Swiatek's serve once again. She hit a series of deep, penetrating returns right at Swiatek's feet, forcing errors. Eala broke right back. The air completely left Swiatek's lungs. The resistance was broken. Serving for the match at 5-2, the atmosphere was electric. You could hear a pin drop in the stadium before every serve. Eala stepped up to the line, her face a mask of total concentration. She didn't falter. She didn't double fault. She dictated the final points with the poise of a 10-year veteran. On match point, Eala engaged in a brief cross-court rally before perfectly anticipating Swiatek's movement. Eala stepped around her backhand, wound up, and unleashed a spectacular forehand winner down the line. It was the absolute ultimate knockout blow. The moment the ball flashed past Swiatek and clipped the baseline, Eala dropped her racket and collapsed onto the grass. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with the overwhelming release of tension, joy, and disbelief. It was a raw, beautiful, and completely unscripted moment of pure sporting emotion. The crowd rose to their feet for a massive, sustained standing ovation. It wasn't just a polite Wimbledon golf clap. It was a roaring, full-throated acknowledgement of a star being born right before their eyes. When Eala finally picked herself up and walked the net to embrace Swiatek, who was gracious in defeat, offering a warm hug to the young conqueror, the reality of what had just occurred began to sink in. The post-match on-court interview is destined to become the stuff of legend. When asked to describe her feelings, an incredibly emotional Eala looked around the towering stands of center court, her voice trembling but filled with pride. She said, "I don't know how to describe this feeling. I'm into the second week of a Grand Slam, and it is amazing for me. IGA is a phenomenal player and a really nice person, so I'm really grateful to be able to share center court with her at Wimbledon nonetheless." But it was her next quote that struck a chord with millions of fans watching around the globe, particularly back in the Philippines. She spoke directly to her roots, saying, "For someone like Iga, who has won so many Grand Slams, this achievement may seem small, but for someone who grew up in the Philippines, it is huge. I went to train with my brother and my grandfather every day after school with my ruffled socks, light-up shoes, and chubby cheeks. So to younger me, this is everything." That vivid, beautiful imagery. A little girl in ruffled socks and light-up shoes on courts of Manila, dreaming of Wimbledon. Humanized the supreme athlete we had just watched dismantle the world number 3. Eala finished her interview with a fiercely competitive spark that perfectly encapsulates her mindset, adding, "But obviously, just because I'm emotional does not mean I'm satisfied. So next round, let's go." To fully grasp the mechanics of this upset, we have to look closely at the statistical and tactical breakdown of the match, because Eala did not just win with emotion. She won with clinical, tactical masterclass. Over the course of the match, Eala won an impressive 92 points, compared to Swiatek's 78. The serving statistics tell a massive part of the story. While Swiatek struggled, hitting 5 double faults and only managing a 47% first serve percentage, Eala was a rock. Eala successfully landed 63% of her first serves. More importantly, when the pressure was at its absolute peak, Eala produced aces, hitting 4 in the match compared to Swiatek's 1. Eala won 35 return points, constantly keeping Swiatek on the back foot during her own service games. Eala generated 7 break points and converted 5 of them, a devastatingly efficient conversion rate against a player of Swiatek's caliber. Swiatek, conversely, was given 11 breakpoint opportunities but could only convert 3. That discrepancy in clutch moments, the ability to play one's best tennis when the margins are thinnest, is what separates a good player from a Grand Slam contender. Eala was undeniably the better player in the crucial moments today. Furthermore, Eala's ability to neutralize Swiatek's return was phenomenal. As a lefty, Eala was able to slide the ball out wide in the ad court, forcing Swiatek to hit defensive backhand returns on the stretch. When Swiatek did manage to get the ball deep, Eala didn't retreat. She held her ground on the baseline, took the ball early, and redirected the pace beautifully down the line. It was a tactical blueprint on how to dismantle a heavy topspin baseline grinder on a fast surface. Eala essentially took Swiatek's greatest weapons, her time and her court position, and stripped them away completely. Now, we must examine the massive, reverberating consequences of this result for the wider landscape of women's tennis. For Iga Świątek, this loss is nothing short of catastrophic for her immediate standing in the sport. Coming into Wimbledon desperate to stop the bleeding after a title-less clay season, this third-round exit is a bitter pill to swallow. Defending a Grand Slam title comes with massive ranking points, and by crashing out in the first week, Swiatek drops a staggering 1,870 points. This devastating loss temporarily plummets her down to 6th place in the WTA Live rankings. It is a shocking fall from grace for a player who, just 12 months ago, looked utterly invincible. Swiatek is now facing profound crossroads in her career. She will have to regroup, rethink her tactics, and rebuild her shattered confidence as the tour pivots to the North American hardcourt swing, culminating at the U.S. Open. She needs titles, and she needs them urgently, to reestablish her aura of invincibility. The locker room smells blood. The rest of the tour now knows that the Polish superstar is vulnerable, not just on grass, but mentally. Eala has laid out the blueprint, and every coach in the top 50 will be studying this match tape obsessively. On the other side of the coin, the sky is the absolute limit for Alexandra Eala. The 21-year-old Filipina is currently surging up the rankings. With this victory, she rockets to a career-high live ranking of 27th in the world, firmly establishing herself as a seeded threat moving forward. But more than the numbers, Eala has proven to herself and to the world that she possesses the championship mentality required to win at the highest level. She proved she can withstand the physical punishment of a long match against a top-tier opponent. And she proved she has the ice in her veins to close out a defending champion on center court. Looking ahead, Eala's historic run at Wimbledon is far from over. By advancing to the round of 16, she has set up a highly anticipated clash with the 13th seed, Italy's Jasmine Paolini. Paolini is coming off a blisteringly fast victory, having completely swatted aside the former world number 3, Maria Sakkari, in a brutal 6-1, 6-1 demolition that took just over an hour. Paolini is a brilliant, dynamic player, known for her incredible foot speed and aggressive, flat ground strokes. She was the 2024 runner-up here, and she knows her way around the grass courts perfectly. The Eala versus Paolini matchup promises to be a fascinating contrast in styles and a severe test of Eala's physical recovery. Eala just expended a massive amount of physical and emotional energy slaying the dragon that was Iga Świątek. The biggest challenge for young players who pull off a monumental upset is the letdown effect. In the following round, Eala will have to completely wipe her emotional slate clean. She cannot afford to still be celebrating her third-round victory when she steps onto the court against an opponent as dangerous and dialed in as Paolini. However, if Eala's post-match comments are any indication, she is laser-focused. She understands that opportunities like this do not come around often. As she stated on court, "When I have my opportunities, I have to take them because they are blessings. Just being here is a blessing. I worked so hard to get here, and I'm taking it." That is the mindset of a veteran, not a 21-year-old playing in the second week of major for first time. If Eala can maintain the serving rhythm she found against Swiatek and continue to step inside the baseline to dictate play with her lefty forehand, there's absolutely no reason she cannot power past Paolini and deep into the quarterfinals or beyond. The cultural impact of Eala's run also cannot be overstated. We are witnessing the birth of a sporting icon for Philippines and for Southeast Asia as a whole. Tennis is a global sport, but it has historically been dominated by Europe and North America. Eala is breaking down geographical and cultural barriers with every swing of her racket. She is inspiring a completely new generation of young athletes in the Philippines who are now picking up tennis rackets, realizing that a kid from Manila can indeed grow up to conquer center court at Wimbledon. The sight of her team wearing the Sampaguita shirts, the national pride she wears so openly on her sleeve, these elements transcend the sport itself. She is not just playing for herself. She is elevating the profile of tennis in an entire region of the world. As we wrap up this extensive deep dive, we are left to marvel at the sheer beauty and unpredictability of the sport we love. Today, Wimbledon gave us a script that no Hollywood writer could have penned. We saw a struggling champion fighting desperately to hold on to her crown, and we saw a fearless, brilliant young challenger rip it from her grasp in a match of breathtaking quality and drama. Alexandra Eala's stunning 7-6, 6-2 victory over Iga Świątek is a match that will be talked about for decades. It is a defining moment of the 2026 Wimbledon Championships thus far. It serves as a stark reminder that in tennis, past accolades mean nothing when you step across the white lines. It is only about who is better on that specific given day. Today, a 21-year-old girl who used to play in ruffled socks and light-up shoes was the best player in the world. Thank you so much for joining me for this comprehensive analysis of an unforgettable day at Wimbledon. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned as we continue to follow Alex Eala's historic, trailblazing run to the second week of this tournament, as well as all the fallout from the rest of the draw. The lawns of SW19 have been thoroughly shaken, and the second week of Wimbledon 2026 promises to be absolutely unmissable. Until next time, enjoy the tennis, and we will see you on the next deep dive.